This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft, because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn, Robert, and I are talking Act 2, and this will be a library episode, so make sure you head over to storyworkspodcast.com and check out the show notes. Kathryn is going to link this episode to all of our related episodes in a cool slider at the bottom of the show notes. All right, so Act 2, what problems do you face with Act 2? Should we start there? Problems?
Well, it's the biggest section of your book, so...
So more things can go wrong, right?
100%.
A big problem is that when you dream up your story, you have this amazing sense of, I just thought of this amazing thing that's going to happen to this character and then how it's all going to end. Okay, but there's 50% of your novel which is just haven't thought about yet, So
Yes.
I think for many of us, it's being able to slow down, tease apart the problems, and introduce all of the complications that are required to then deliver that, delicious climax that is really satisfying to the reader. So it's such an important task, yet it's probably the thing we naturally as writers, and I'm making it sort of very everybody. It's not everybody's problem, of course. But we do know it's, many of us experience the problem where we don't know what to put in the middle there, I suppose. So, so perhaps, and that's why that's why we go with 3 acts. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, or you go with 4 acts, or you go with the tent poles, or you go with pinch points and plot points and turning points and midpoints. And, somehow we need something to hang stuff on.
We like having a framework to fill in.
Yeah.
We don't like to have this big empty gap. Like, just tell me what to put in here, please.
Yes. Yeah, I think, my coaching group right now is in the middle of Act 2. So we've been talking about Act 2 for a while. And one of the things I'm noticing is that in constructing the story, as you were saying, Robert, you have this great inciting incident and you have this great climax. And then writers have maybe 2 or 3 moments in their story, plot points in mind that are going to link the inciting incident and the climax. But then you sit down and you write those and it's like 20 to 50 pages and you need, 150 pages. And it's like, oh no, now what? How do I build the story that is connecting these dots through Act 2? And then also, how do I make sure that escalation is happening so that the story feels like this movement that brings us up the hill to the climax instead of this sort of weird, implausible plodding along and then zing, here's some big explosive event, right?
The gods came down and solved it all.
Right, exactly. So we've been, I know I talked to Alida about this, but you weren't here, Robert, when we talked about me and my friend doing some co-writing.
Excuse myself. Terrible.
Oh, Robert.
So my friend and I are co-writing an urban fantasy, and we're in these, like the outlining and storyboarding phase, and we're in the middle of Act 2 right now. And so it's just kind of very timely for me. But what I found, for myself, it's really interesting. I very much focus on the main plot. So I'm like, what happens next on the way to the climax? And for her, she's much more like, ooh, what's the fun thing that we can do right here? So it's been working really well to mix and match that, where we're getting a lot more subplot development than I normally do on my own, just bubbling up. Because she's like, well, what if she does this? Or what if she does that? Or wouldn't it be funny if this main, side character came in? And I was like, yeah, that would be hilarious. You know what? That's a subplot. Let's weave it in here. And then they can help with this. And then they can move this. And so I can kind of redirect it to where I can see it building towards the climax. But she's all about, this is really fun. Let's make this really fun. And I think sometimes I miss that on my road through Act 2. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of writers do. a lot of writers do focus on the main plot. We invest so much in structuring these elements and thinking about the protagonist's motivation and what does the protagonist need to know and do in order to take this journey. And then you can lose sight of the relationship piece. So it's really cool that you and your friend are bringing those two aspects together. My coaching group, but also clients over the years, struggle with the Act Two because they aren't bringing the supporting characters into the story in a way that is complicating as well as enhancing the movement toward the climax. And we have to remember that our protagonist isn't in a vacuum. We give her friends and family and bosses and all the rest of it for a reason. And that reason is to help us keep the story engaging as it moves through those main plot points that get us up to the climax.
Yeah. And they're not side tracks, right? You don't want them to be completely separate, but if you can weave them through it's fun, right? That's the fun stuff. And so I think my main plot ended up with a side romance over here and a friendship plot over here and, all these adventure things going on. And I was like, oh my gosh, so much easier than doing this by myself.
I think, the two of you there just sort of really articulated the keys to it. You can't have side plots in Act Two. It's the worst thing. And the only reason you can have it is because it complicates the main plot and it illustrates the antagonistic forces still working behind the scenes, even if they're not directly facing the antagonistic force. Because I made that exact mistake in this book that I'm still writing. And now I've now solved that problem, which has been fantastic. And it's been slow going because I haven't had the time to do more than, one day a week. But I had lots of exciting stuff happening in the middle, which is great. And it was really action-packed, and I like action stories. But then I realized that none of it really had much to do with what the overall antagonistic force was and what the ultimate climax that, Indy's going to have to solve right at the end of the story. So it would have been interesting, but a bit like eating popcorn, sort of, okay, yeah, that was good. But why was it there? So I think what Kathryn said is, it's not a side plot. It's something that complicates in a different way, maybe in an unexpected way, which is always nice as a reader, where you get something that makes sense. You go, oh, right, of course. So like normal life, we set out to do something. I set out to solve a problem on the computer, and then 4 hours later, I seem to have solved 98 other problems that weren't relevant to the first problem, but I still have to solve those in order to solve the computer problem. Or my wife goes out to the garden and then 3 hours later she says, I think we need to get some more dirt in, or we need to do this. So we have to think about what complicates and escalates that keeps getting in the way, but firmly with that main, goal and conflict and problem in mind. And I think that's where it gets difficult, because in your head, you've got that solution already because you've got the beginning and the end. So, but I know how they fix it. I just have to get there. Yes, but the protagonist doesn't know that yet.
Right.
Exactly.
And the journey, the getting there is what makes the end.
That's the story.
The experience. Yeah, exactly. That is the story, and I think it's important too that we keep in mind how much our supporting characters can do for us, because sometimes we pigeonhole them. We think like, well, my protagonist is in Minneapolis and her mom is in Seattle, and so that's that. They have this visit, and then she goes back to Minneapolis, and then we don't see the mom again, right? But what if mom gets on a plane or a train or something? What if you bring mom in later in Act Two to be a busybody in the protagonist's life at home, which totally messes up her ability to, do the thing in the main plot, because now she's got to look after mom, and mom is triggering all of her emotional baggage. And right. So don't limit where your supporting characters are and what roles they can play in your story. Keep yourself open to possibilities and brainstorm things. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in a coaching group we say, well, what if you bring that character here? Or what if so-and-so does this in addition to that, or instead of this other thing? And it's like, oh, that just solved 3 problems, right?
Yeah. When we talk about having have too many ideas, like when we're talking about starting things, like, okay, we always have too many ideas. And I think that Act 2 needs to be viewed that way too. Like, let's just bring every idea.
Yeah.
Right. Like, just keep going. Just keep going. Like, what else could happen? What else could happen? What else? What if? What if we put them together? What if we put them together? What if we did that? And then once you've got an overwhelming feeling amount of ideas, then you can sift through and say, oh, actually, let's just done. Right. Because otherwise, I think you're leaving stuff on the table, and it's, maybe you haven't dug deep enough to find the really cool connections yet.
Are you curious about group coaching for fiction authors? I am accepting applicants ready to join a great group of writers. Group coaching participants love the consistent feedback loop while working on their novels, and ongoing access to an experienced storycraft coach with a decade in developmental editing, teaching, and personalized coaching. Do you want to have your concerns addressed and questions answered in real time as you work on your novel? Want to have a writing partner for support and accountability? Want to continually hone your craft instead of getting stuck in writing old habits? Then apply today for the new session. Details are at wordessential.com/fiction-group-coaching. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. I would love to chat with you. There are contact forms at wordessential.com and also at storyworkspodcast.com. Now back to this week's episode. Right. Yes. Yeah. And that brings to mind the flip side of this coin. Like, on the one hand, bring it all in, censor nothing, see where it goes, play and create that stuff. But then the flip side of that, the other problem I see is when writers are like, okay, I've got the friend doing this and the brother doing that and the mother doing this and the boyfriend over here, and I don't know, this too many scenes and too many settings, and does this one have enough tension in it? And I don't know. And you say, okay, could we have a brother or a friend instead of both? Could you merge them so that one person is being the complicating factor? The complication can be positive or negative, but that person in your protagonist's life, instead of trying to spread it out between more settings, more characters, more incidents for your protagonist to deal with, because it dilutes the tension that you create in those moments. If I've got tension with a brother and tension with a friend, those are 2 sort of tension pots. But if you have those 2 sources of tension with one person, now there's more in that relationship, more to deal with, more to carry forward and ripple out.
Yeah. I just want to say that Alida did this to me with a short story where she asked me if I really needed this and that.
Right.
And I combined them. I ended up with a really cool story that I didn't expect about 2 brothers instead of about one person. Right. And that was, so it works.
I know, because I was thinking about another angle to come at that with. It reminds me of it's a little known book by authors, but a craft book. I think it's called Blueprint Your Bestseller by Stuart Horwitz, and he talks about he calls them series, but let's not use that word because it's too many other names. I would call them threads. So if you look for threads that go through a novel, some of the most exciting times for us as a reader are when those threads converge, and when multiple threads converge, especially if it's the main one that's to do with the central problem the main character or the protagonist is trying to solve, at the same time as some of these other supporting threads cross, then you get these really powerful scenes. Mm-hmm. So if you can't decide whether you need to merge a character or not, you could always say, okay, let me twist that and think about what are the emotional threads or what are the plot threads that this character is carrying through the story. How does that intersect with the main character? And can they carry two threads, or does it still really need to be two separate characters, or a setting and a character that force that? Because I think part of the problem is that in a novel, your inciting incident diverges everything. Everything splits, and then we know at the end of the story we want everything to converge. So in the middle, everything's just flapping around. But that doesn't mean you can't have things converging. So this is where the supporting characters can converge to provide the conflict and the tension, getting in the way of solving the main problem. But I really like Horwitz's idea that some of those things can be threads that are divergent at the start, but they can start to cross. And then if at the end of the story you pull them all together, then all of a sudden you've got this sort of, whoa, sort of moment. So that's just another way to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. It's, as we were saying at the beginning, I think Kathryn said it first, that you don't have side plots, right? Subplots are always woven through. And so you have those intersections and convergences. And as you were describing this, Robert, I was thinking about how these moments of convergence need to escalate your story to bring us closer to the climax. And in a show I was just watching called Wakefield, this character has a coworker he used to be engaged with, and then his sister invites the coworker, his ex-fiance, to her. It's a Hindu wedding, so it's a party to get the henna tattoos. Kind of like if you invited her to your bachelorette party, but it's not that, right? But a pre-wedding event, and he's like, "Why did you invite her to this?" And it's not enough just to have this person kind of intrude in his life and have it be tangential to the main story. Like, oh, okay, sure, having your ex invited to your sister's wedding event is kind of awkward. Okay, oh well. It does more than that, because the tension he feels, the irritation he feels at this invitation going to his ex-fiance contributes to the tension and anxiety that is mounting in him toward his climax, which is very emotional, right? And so you see not just this like, oh, awkward moment. You see how the sister's wedding, the working relationship with the ex-fiance is all coming together, as you were describing, Robert, that convergence of threads to drive us at an accelerated rate toward the climax.
Yeah. So really what we've come to conclusion is there's a lot of moving parts in Act 2.
Yes. Yeah. And use your supporting characters and your subplots effectively so that they aren't just alongside your main plot, and they aren't just interesting moments of relationship tension, but that they are actually helping to drive us toward the climax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
another thing that we have episodes on that we haven't really touched on yet is the problem of not driving towards your climax the whole time. So not just, having a side plot, not a subplot, but having that soggy middle, or the kind of like dip instead of climb. So that's another problem that can happen quite easily in Act 2.
Right. And the soggy middle, sorry, I don't know what's going on here, but the soggy middle is also solved by using your subplots and your supporting characters. There are times when the main plot needs to breathe. It can't always be fast action, go, 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 high tension, everything, peaking at once. And so there might be like traveling chapters where we just need to gather information, or we need to recover from something dramatic that just happened, or we need, right? The action ebbs and flows. And so in those moments where the main plot is taking a breather or is on kind of a downbeat, bring in that subplot so you keep the emotional engagement and the forward movement without needing to always be focused on that driving action of the main plot.
I think if I've learned anything from what we're talking about in this particular episode, both of you have really, really gone heavily on the what if. So I suppose that for analytical plotters like me, that's my main problem, is that logically I want to get from A to B, and so that's what I'm plotting. And I think discovery writers here can actually find, it's like for us, if we took a side time of some journaling or something, it might reveal things that we didn't otherwise think about, which is what the whole what if is. And as a discovery writer, maybe that's the way that a lot of discovery writers will write is, well, what if this happens and this happens and this happens? And so I think that's a fantastic way to address what do I need in Act 2, is to start with the what ifs, and then starts to stitch them back as we've talked about in a myriad of different ways, whether that be through subplots or central to the main plot still, supporting characters, complications you didn't think about, it's, as I said before, it is the story, really. This is the interesting thing. You just, it's pretty boring if you say, today this morning I went out. Oh, really? Yeah. I went to the shop and I bought some more flour. Well, that's fantastic, Robert. Yeah. Do tell us another interesting story. But if it's, this morning I went out, you won't believe what I saw on the highway. What? 5 deer crossing the highway. It was carnage. Luckily, none of them got hurt, but there were trucks piling up. Why did the deer get out? All of a sudden we've got a story. Okay, I've got something I want to listen to. Well, maybe not, but, but you get the idea. I mean, it's meant to be the travel. It's where we're taking our reader. And I think, if I think about my role as an author, that is my job. I'm meant to entertain. You go to a well-known rock band or a comedian or some stage play, and you expect that something's going to get you gripped at the start, and then you're going to be entranced. You don't expect to start and then have the punchline immediately delivered and then go home. You want to build up to the band's most iconic song right at the end and be standing on your feet cheering.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's my soapbox.
I like it. Thank you for listening to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. If you enjoy the show, if you learn anything about Storycraft, or if you just feel like you're part of our community, the best way you can show us your support is by giving us a 5-star review wherever you find podcasts. We would really appreciate it. Now, don't forget, we will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode. And, these off weeks are a great chance to go into our back catalog. We have over 250 episodes on Storycraft. All of them are cataloged with show notes that are time-stamped at storyworkspodcast.com. All right, have a great writing week, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.